Good afternoon. My name is Patrick Stewart, and I'm the CEO of the San Diego Public Library Foundation, and I want to thank you all for joining us today. I'm joined this afternoon by Wendy Urushima-Conn, Chair of the San Diego Library Commission, and with the support of the Friends of the San Diego Public Library. Together, our organizations combine to form the library's Transform SD Coalition. We are pleased to have the honor of welcoming mayoral candidate, Assemblymember Todd Gloria, so that he can share his vision for the future of our city and of our libraries. We know how busy these mayoral campaigns can be, and we're very grateful for the generous amount of time that he's provided. Before we welcome the Assembly member on stage, I'd like to share a little bit about the format of the event and the platform that we are using. Once on stage, Assemblymember Gloria will have the opportunity to share a 3-minute opening statement, giving us some insight about his background, why he has decided to run for mayor, and his connections to San Diego's libraries. My colleague and I will ask 5 questions that were prepared in advance and made available to both mayoral campaigns. The previous conversation with Councilmember Barbara Bree occurred on October 5th and is available for viewing on the Library Foundation's YouTube channel. This conversation will be made available directly after our conversation as well. At the conclusion of the prepared questions, we will present a couple questions from our audience. Everyone is welcome to submit a question in the Questions tab just to the left of the chat window below. Again, we'll only have time for a few, so we may not be able to get to all of them. I'd also like to bring your attention to the call to action button on the bottom of your screen. Please click on this button if you are interested in learning more about our library's Transform SD Coalition, our advocacy efforts, and to subscribe to Libraries Transform SD advocacy alerts. With that, I am very pleased to invite Assemblymember Todd Gloria on stage to introduce himself and to share a little bit about his vision for our libraries.
Patrick, thank you so much. Wendy, thank you as well. And thank you all for your time and for your attention. I appreciate this opportunity to share a bit about myself, my vision for our city, and specifically as it relates to our libraries. You know, I share with people that I'm a native San Diegan. I'm a 3rd-generation San Diegan. I grew up in Claremont, attended Madison High School, and graduated from the University of San Diego. And I share that because that is where my love for our local public libraries began. I got my library card at a very young age, starting at the North Claremont Library and then transitioning to the Balboa Branch Library. And I have so many fond memories of how transformative that experience was for me as a young person, as a nerdy kid from Claremont who just enjoyed checking out books and the solitude of that quiet setting, as well as the fellowship with the librarians that would be there to help me explore my interests, to help me with my homework, and to keep me out of trouble and off the streets after school. So many fond memories that really inspired my advocacy for the libraries when I was later elected to the city council and served for 6 years as the city's budget chairperson. It was during those times, which coincided with the Great Recession, where that love and your partnership with the Friends of the Library and the Library Foundation is where we were able to limit budgetary impacts to our library, as well as complete a number of important capital projects, of course, the crowning jewel being the reopening of our new Central Library in East Village. All of that is to say, this long history of mine will not be forgotten if given the opportunity to be your next mayor. And I recognize the next number of years will be extremely difficult, but the relationships that we have built with the Library Foundation, the Friends and others, I think will help us make sure that we get through this time with limited negative impacts to our branch libraries, and hopefully allow us to build a better branch library system that delivers on the branch libraries that have long been promised in communities like San Carlos and elsewhere, where we have unfinished business, but I believe that we can get something done. I want to bring my lifetime of public sector experience, both as a city council member, as a council president, as the city's interim mayor, and now as a state legislature to bear, because we recognize that those relationships are help us bring the resources, the funding, and the strategy to get these things done. Ultimately, I'm running for mayor because I want to get things done for my hometown. And my parents, hardworking, blue-collar folks, raised my brother and I to believe that if you care about something, you should leave it better than you found it. What I don't think they realized at the time is that was a perfect recipe for a career in public service. At the end of the day, I love my hometown, and I've spent my entire career doing everything I can to make it a better place to live. And making it better necessarily includes making sure that we have a world-class library system. So thank you so much for the chance to share some of those thoughts with you. I look forward to answering your questions and working together in the years ahead to make sure that our libraries are there for children like they were there for me so many years ago.
Thank you, Assemblymember Gloria, for sharing a little bit about yourself and your vision for our city. It is always good to see you and have you here with us this afternoon. So before I continue with the questions, I'd like just to take a brief moment to introduce myself to our audience. My name is Wendy Urushima-Conn, and I am the chair of the San Diego Public Library Commission. So commissioners are nominated by the mayor and approved by City Council to provide guidance on policy impacting the library system. So the Library Commission, as well as the Friends of the Library and the San Diego Library Foundation, really care deeply about how San Diego can close the digital divide and increase access and equity in the library system. So with that introduction, I will ask our first question on the topic of equity. So with so many San Diegans working and learning remotely, access to technology is no longer a luxury, but it's really a lifeline. Can you share your vision for how the library might play a role in creating a more equitable San Diego?
Well, thank you for the question, Wendy. And I want to just acknowledge that it already does play that role. It played that role for me in my life. Again, without childcare after school, and without the access to computers and other sorts of amenities that students need to be successful, the library played that role in my life. And I know that our librarians do that every single day, even in this time where operations are curtailed because of the pandemic. I think going forward, the library can play a leading role in making sure that we continue to knock down these barriers between us, particularly for some of our young people in neighborhoods, and frankly, adults who don't have access to the kinds of things they need to be successful in their lives. You know, as your mayor, it's my responsibility to build a great city. A great city is one that invests in its people and it gives them the opportunities that they need to be successful. And that, again, necessarily includes our branch libraries. What are some of the things that we can do? Well, you know, I think one of the most important ways that we can support equity is making sure that the library is open as much as possible. I recognize that back when I was a young person, the libraries were open a lot more than they are today. And we have to continue to make investments to make sure that the doors are open and that folks can access the books and the publications and the computer labs and other things that really make those opportunities available. I think that to the extent that we have to continue to grapple with distance learning as our schools remain closed because of the virus, I think the libraries could play an important role of trying to bridge some of those learning gaps that are happening, particularly for families who don't have the luxury of being able to work from home and necessarily are unable to provide the kinds of instruction that we'd hope that their students could get. I think going forward, beyond investing and making sure the operations of the libraries are open, that they are serving in these bridging roles during the pandemic, I think long-term is making sure that the library utilization is equitable across communities. What do I mean by that? Well, we recognize that certain communities, the library may be one of the few resources there are in that community. And so as we look at trying to get through the next couple of difficult budget years, doing that through an equity lens, making sure those communities that heavily rely upon their branch libraries, that we do our best to limit reductions there and potentially invest in any enhancements are done in those communities, I think could be a tremendous and important way to provide equity. And then again, that's also truthful for the long-term prospects of building new libraries, particularly in communities that we increasingly are asking to take on the responsibilities of building new housing, that those communities are also given the benefit of additional public infrastructure like branch libraries.
Thank you so much for your insight there. Before we move on to our next question, I'd like to share a little bit about the Friends of the San Diego Public Library. The Friends of the San Diego Public Library has been in existence for more than 40 years, and there are active chapters at each branch library. The chapters raise funds through used book sales and private donations, and they use these funds to provide materials, equipment, and program resources to each branch. For the last 16 years, in collaboration with the San Diego Public Library Foundation, the library community has successfully raised $1 million in private funds to have the city match each donation up to $1 million. So with that introduction, I'll ask the second question of the event. Without the inclusion of private philanthropy, the city of San Diego's spending for library materials such as books, digital databases, language acquisition software, resources for the visually impaired, and ebooks is only $1.28 per capita, one of the lowest among large metropolitan areas in the nation, and approximately half of what the county of San Diego spends. And additionally, there has not been an increase in these material budgets since 2009. As mayor, would you commit to increasing the amount of funds the city spends on library materials and increase the amount of the city match to facilitate additional philanthropy?
Yes, and I want to start by thanking the Friends and other philanthropic groups that are helping to bridge the gaps that the city has not been able to provide. And Patrick, that question is important because I think that particularly given the circumstances we're going to find ourselves in over the next year or two because of the recession, these kinds of partnerships will be pretty important. And Patrick, I'd ask you to judge me on what I've done in the past to understand what I would do going forward as your mayor. As the chair of the city's budget committee, you constantly saw me year after year standing up to propose reductions to library hours and other sorts of reductions to publications and whatnot. Now, that doesn't get to the point that you're asking about in terms of enhancements, but is a recognition of the fact that I get it, that I understand the inherent value of our libraries, that I appreciate the partnership with groups like the Friends and the Foundation, and that I as mayor could start from a different place, a different starting point, one that doesn't include reductions, but instead gets to what you're asking, which is how can we start enhancing the offerings that the city has. I would hope to be able to do that. I think that in the size of the budget that we're talking about, even a reduced one, that there is latitude to allow for a real commitment to address the needs in the community. And it gets back to Wendy's previous question about when we find ourselves in a situation where our communities are hurting, when the inequities in our society are laid bare because of the coronavirus, and at a time when we're seeing historically high unemployment, I, as your mayor, would understand the important role that libraries can play in addressing some of these needs. And that's why I can say yes to the question, because I see it as a part of a recovery package that the city could help put forward to try and signal to San Diegans that we are going to work together to climb out of the hole we find ourselves in, and that will give people hope that they can get back to some level of normalcy sooner rather than later. Again, I see the library and these partnering organizations as being key in making that happen.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Now I want to ask a question about an important project that we're working on at the San Diego Public Library Foundation. We're working on a citywide library master plan with the support of the Library Commission and in collaboration with the Friends of the Public Library. The last citywide plan to support the library system was created and passed by the City Council in 2002. The plan envisioned building or improving 24 libraries throughout the city by 2012. At the heart of this plan was a new central library, which we were thrilled to see open in 2014. However, unfortunately, much of the plan was not realized and is terribly outdated. Many of the communities that we talk about are left out of the plan, and therefore the Library Foundation, in collaboration with the Commission and the Friends, have begun the first phase of a citywide master plan. Can you share why you think that this is important and how you might support a library master plan as the next mayor?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a number of ways that a mayor can be critical for such a master plan, and updating it is a no-brainer. What the challenge, of course, is going to be to actually hit the marks that are in that plan. But without a plan, you plan to fail, right? And so we have to have some sort of blueprint for what we would like to do, what kind of system that we want to have, and where the investments are needed. And as you deal with a budget year in, year out, good years and bad years, it helps to have a guiding document that people can come around in terms of consensus, in terms of support, that the mayor and the council can be held accountable for. So a master plan of that nature, I think, is important. And what I think is the next step after that is to match it with a capital outlay plan that we could work on collaboratively. What do I mean by that? Well, I think about my experiences, not just building the new central library, but my experience in helping to construct the Mission Hills Hillcrest Library with the help of the foundation. And when you identify particular critical projects, and when private sector partners and philanthropic partners can provide funding, it was my responsibility as chair of the budget committee and as the city council member for Mission Hills and Hillcrest to go and find the funding to finish off that particular project. In that particular case, we used an infrastructure bond that was floated to construct both the Skyline, Mission Hills, and I believe a couple other branch libraries. And my point is that master plan can be a guiding document to help the city align things like future infrastructure bonds to match the plans that we lay out. And it gives an indication to partners like the Friends and the Foundation to help raise the critical philanthropic dollars that can actually get these projects off the page and into construction. So updating the plan is natural, but my fervent hope is that we can make it far more than a plan, but something that we actually implement and deploy upon. But again, we can't start anywhere without an actual plan of what we want to accomplish, and that's why a master plan is important.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you for your comments and for your past support of our libraries. It's really appreciated. So I am really hopeful for what the Library Master Plan can do to help us plan for the library of the future. So one of the major components that we are looking at as part of this effort is how can we improve our library facilities? So I'd like to take this opportunity to ask about how you as mayor would invest in library infrastructure. So according to a recent facility report conducted by the city, nearly 30% of our libraries are in poor condition. The independent budget analyst has identified general fund facilities such as libraries are one of the largest areas of unfunded infrastructure needs. So how will you address the infrastructure backlog and support needed facility improvements for libraries?
Yeah. Well, it sort of goes back to what I was just sharing with Patrick, Wendy, but a plan itself, helps to identify. Presumably, it wouldn't just be about what we would build new, but what we must repair in order for some of these, existing neighborhood gems that we need to reinvest in and keep functional and working. And what I would say is that, again, that plan would inform a plan of finance that the city's debt management department could use to figure out, again, where infrastructure bonding capacity would be appropriate, and then go out and do that. But maybe another funding mechanism that's worthy of note, and I think, again, this is particularly important because of the growing nature of our city and increasingly urban communities that are being asked to accommodate additional growth, that as we update community plans, and as a consequence, update developer impact fees, that we make sure those fees are matched to our needs in the community, whether that's a new library or the maintenance of an existing library. We know these are pretty critical for quality of life, particularly as new housing is developed. So to the extent of how can we maintain the buildings that we must maintain, I would acknowledge that the city is not hitting its mark, not just in libraries, but in rec centers and a host of other city-owned assets. I would hope to bring a more comprehensive point of view to this with a more structured view on how we can finance this appropriately over the long term. These are assets that you can take on, these long-term obligations, and do it, I think, in a reasonable way. But the structuring of a plan, matching it with a plan of finance, and then making sure that we're assessing developers their fair share to make sure we're matching those needs in the community, I think are the ways that the public sector can match this. And to the extent that our bonding capacity and our developer fees cannot match the entirety of the need, this is where I would hope to, as mayor, be able to sit down with Patrick and with Wendy and the friends and figure out how we can fill in those gaps utilizing the extreme generosity of San Diegans that we've seen on display with multiple library projects, but I think could actually be harnessed even more effectively if we had an updated plan with a recognition of what the city is doing to help itself and allowing people to understand how they can help us get across the finish line with a gift that would be transformative for communities, particularly communities, again, that are changing rapidly.
Thank you, Todd, for that answer, and I like it. Existing neighborhood gems, they are indeed. So our next question is about how we fund our libraries. So the library's annual operating budget continues to be far below the 6% target outlined in the library ordinance. So in 2020, it was 3.9%. So this represents 30 million less than the 6% mandate in the library ordinance. Additionally, the Libraries Transform Coalition has had to fight to prevent millions in budget reductions in the last 2 budget cycles. So while we do recognize the economic and financial challenges the city is facing amid COVID-19, can you speak to how you might resource libraries?
Yeah, and Wendy, I think it starts with trying not to be on the defensive, right? I think that what I feel for library advocates year after year is having to drive down to City Hall and pay to park and file the speaker slip to advocate for something that everyone universally loves. And I say that with deep appreciation for those who do that. But I think what you're looking for from the next mayor is someone that doesn't, again, start at the starting point of we will necessarily cut libraries, but instead start in a place of recognizing this for what they are, which are in critical neighborhood infrastructure, civic infrastructure. I recently finished the book Palaces for the People, in which libraries play a critical role in the social infrastructure of a community, the civic infrastructure of a community. But starting from a different point, which is, again, not one of reaction and defense, but hopefully one of offense. Now, that will be hard in the case of the budget for the next couple of years. But Wendy, I want to hold out 2 pieces of hope. One is that over those many years that I chaired the budget committee, what I came to understand is that libraries are a bargain. that, you know, additional library hours are relatively inexpensive, in my personal opinion. When I looked at the sum of, you know, various cost drivers, an additional hour here and there were relatively modest investments that I know had tremendous positive impact much beyond. So to use a business term, the ROI, right? The additional hour or two here or there was so transformative for communities. So, you know, again, coming from a different starting point, recognizing the value of additional investments in this area. And then lastly, Wendy, you talked about the 6% target, which we've never hit. In the sense that the city's budget is kind of in free fall at the moment, and the next mayor is probably going to have to make some serious and very difficult decisions extremely early in their tenure. I choose to see that in a more optimistic way. I choose to see it as saying that we're starting from a new baseline. And so that when you're arguing and when advocates come down to City Hall to argue on the city budget, if we can not start in a defensive position, but start in an offensive position, and if we can start from a new baseline, not one that says that in order to get to 6%, we have to take money away from other neighborhood services, but instead, as the revenues grow, as the economy comes back again, that we can be deliberate, intentional, purposeful in making sure that we are working our way towards that target that we hit so long ago. I think this is how we can take the lemons that we've currently been served and turn it into lemonades for our library over the next couple of years. And, you know, I'm standing here saying I hope to be the leader that puts those kinds of vision out there. And I'm asking all of you who are watching right now as key leaders and advocates for the library to be partners with me in that effort, again, to get through this difficult time and to build our library system back better.
Todd, thank you so much. Really appreciate your being able to spend time with us and answer some of these questions. In an effort to preserve some of the time, I've had just a few audience-generated questions to try to wrap them up so that they could serve a few purposes. One you kind of touched on already a little bit, and I'd like to maybe expand a little bit more. How have the changes in the library services during COVID impacted what you see as your long-term view of how the library can serve the public?
I think my reaction to that is that, let me take a step back. I feel like often during budget negotiations, not necessarily from elected leaders, but from community members who are often in more privileged positions, question the necessity of libraries in the 21st century. And they feel as though they can get on their home computer, get it on their phone, and they maybe question their validity. Now, that usually made me really, really angry. I would use different language if we weren't being recorded. But my point is that when you see people doing all that they can to try and check out a book and to access, I guess just the library's needs or value to the community is on much greater display. You see people and librarians really proving the value of these institutions. And as I said before, in a context of high unemployment, the access to be able to those computers that allow people to apply for jobs, I think the value of libraries are on full display. And I will take every opportunity I can get to laud, thank, and lift up our city librarians who are much more than folks who know the Dewey Decimal System. These are folks who are doing incredible work in the community. And you see that by their resourcefulness and the innovation that they are going to, the lengths they're going to give San Diegans access to our collections, to our information, and to books that they want. So while I've always been frustrated by people who sort of dismiss or belittle libraries, I've never subscribed to that point of view. My hope is this circumstance really illustrates to people that when we have been in a very difficult situation, people are longing for their libraries. And that should be an indication that as we regrow our city service levels or build back our service levels, that we should keep libraries in the front of our minds.
Thanks. You know, one of the things that the library has been able to do during the pandemic is to create a curbside pickup and drop-off service, which has been immensely helpful for many people and in many communities. Do you think that this kind of a service should continue even after libraries are reopened?
Probably at some locations. You know, I mean, I think that there is, thinking about how I use a library, I mean, I enjoy going there. I enjoy being in that ambiance and in that setting. So, you know, there could be certain locations where that's more appropriate. But my suspicion is that people are going to want to come back to their library. I mean, I've thought of the Balboa Branch Library as being a home away from home. So I guess I would allow librarians and library patrons to inform me as mayor to figure if that's something that we want to make permanent. I think things like outdoor dining are going to be permanent in our city for, I think, fairly obvious reasons. But I'm going to allow the public to really guide us on that. But again, I think my bias is towards sitting in the book stacks and just soaking in the smells and the sounds, or lack of sound, that our libraries provide. And I suspect a lot of people are anxious to get back into their branch libraries and enjoy that full experience.
Yeah. Last quick question deals with real estate. What is your opinion of the future use of the Mission Hills Library? And further, would you consider using the proceeds from a potential sale of the old Central Library, the old Mission Hills, or the old San Ysidro Library as sources of revenue to fund library operations?
Well, yeah. So the master plan update that you were discussing before, Patrick, I think should be inclusive of the revenues that we have. Recognizing we're going into a period of austerity, we're going to have to get creative on the revenues the city can put on the table that hopefully would be attractive to philanthropists to help match or more than match in order to get these projects off the ground. And so I do think that it should be a tool in the toolbox, if you will. You made it specific about Mission Hills, but I'm grateful that you mentioned other locations, because there are other locations. And again, as we look to the needs in communities, I'm mindful of the sign that was on the old IBEW Union Hall on Washington Street that foretold the future library that was on that site. As you may remember, it was faded and illegible before we ever got around to building. I think that was also true for the Serra Mesa Kearny Mesa Branch Library. It's true at the San Carlos Branch Library. I make mention of that just to say that I feel a tremendous responsibility for delivering upon the promises the city is making to communities. And I would see that land sales as being an available tool to us to actually make sure that we put up new branch libraries before the signs are faded, before the community starts getting frustrated, and before the city starts doubting whether or not City Hall can deliver. Those of you who've seen me in public office know that I'm action-oriented, that I try and put forward ideas and get them done. And I would see that those signs as being a representation of a city commitment that we have to honor and to meet.
Thank you. And again, I really want to tell you how much we appreciate you being able to take the time to speak with us today. For our audience, I also want to let you know I've put a link up to the Assembly Member's campaign website if you want to learn a little bit more about his campaign. And with that, as we conclude our time together, I'd like to provide Assembly Member Gloria the opportunity to share a closing statement.
Well, Patrick, you and Wendy both have been so gracious. You talk about my time being busy. Everyone's time is valuable. And, as your mayor, I see myself as your servant, right? As you all are the bosses. And so I appreciate this chance to share a little bit about where my thoughts are with regard to our libraries. But I hope that you understand that it's really from a perspective of partnership, recognizing that the many good things that we've been able to do for our library system, our central library to our branch libraries, has only been accomplishable through the partnership of patrons and of supporters like all of you who are tuned in. So my deep appreciation to all of you. And I hope that the work that we did together over the last 8 years, or over the 8 years I served on the city council, is indicative of what I could do over the next 8 years as your mayor. My door will always be open. I will always be a proud library supporter. And I will always take with me the memories of sitting in the book stacks at that Balboa Branch Library, feeling safe and secure in my own community, allowing me to explore worlds that I wouldn't have been able to explore otherwise, and allowing me to become the person that I have become. And my goal in public service is to make sure that the ladders of opportunity that have been provided to me by this city continue to exist for future generations. And so the libraries are a key component of that vision. I look forward to working with each and every one of you to make sure that they continue to be present for the future of San Diego. So thank you all so much for your time. It is valuable. I respect your time, and I respect your the work that I get to do on your behalf.
Well, we are so grateful to have been able to have this conversation. And speaking of the stack, it's also grateful to be back in libraries, even limited time. As a reminder to those who are listening, I'd also like to let you know that if you want to learn more about our coalition and advocacy efforts, to please visit librariestransformsd.org by clicking the button on the bottom of your screen. And additionally, this event and our previous conversation with Councilmember Barbara Bree have both been recorded and will be able to be viewed on the San Diego Public Library Foundation's YouTube channel. And with that, thank you all and have a good afternoon.